would like to introduce Brian Nessel. He is a holistic health professional, personal trainer, and a nutritionist. He has his degree in holistic nutrition and HHP from the University of San Francisco and the Global College of Natural Medicine. Brian has lost over 100 pounds 5 years ago using the methods and lifestyles he teaches. He speaks around the Midwest on nutrition and healthy living. He's married and has 4 children. And he's currently my hero, and a lot of people in here's heroes. So please join me in welcoming Brian Nessel.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Wow, it's weird to hear my voice. If you hear me sniff a lot, I really apologize. I'm coming down with something, so having a mic really close to my nose, not a great idea, but we'll go with it. Today we are going to be talking about wheat and gluten and gluten-free things and the science behind it all, and why wheat is as bad for you, if not worse, than sugar, and why it is one of the major reasons why our country is fighting the obesity rates that we have going on right now. One of the things to kind of start off with wheat is that wheat's a very difficult thing to stay away from. Wheat and gluten end up showing up in so many different things because we've figured out as a country to use it as a binding agent. We've figured out how to use it as a thickening agent. It shows up in broths. It shows up in foods you wouldn't even expect it to. There's gluten. You have to find gluten-free popcorn now because they're even finding that they can add gluten to popcorn. I'm not talking about the kind of popcorn that you have to pop yourself. If it's pre-popped, you're going to find gluten in it because it's a preserving agent. Gluten even shows up in some of the things that we drink. Some of the sports drinks that are out there right now, they have gluten and wheat in them. Because that's one way to try to get grains into your diet, because that's what we've been preached to. The wheat that we eat today is so entirely different than the wheat that was around 100 years ago. They figured out how to make wheat so that it is easier to mill and easier to make into flour. Because back in the olden days, it took you grinding the living tar out of wheat before you could do anything with wheat. And that is part of the reason, because people always say to me, well, bread's been around. Jesus broke bread with, people all the time, and they weren't fat. Well, it's a different kind of wheat. And back then, when they would make bread, they would have these big old huge chunks of wheat in them that, they would be able to chew and swallow, but it wouldn't be digestible. Because the husk of the wheat, your body can't really do anything with. It goes right through you. In theory, that's a really good thing to have happen because it's one of the things that can help you become regular and this and that. But the wheat that we have today is totally different. The husk of the wheat is much thinner. The bran of the wheat is much thinner. It makes it so that it is much more easily soluble to our bodies. Our bodies don't have to work so hard to digest it. And because of that, wheat, the sugars within wheat are very, very easy for our bodies to synthesize and use immediately. And we'll get to that here in a second. The science behind wheat. In order to really truly understand why wheat is so awful for you, you kind of have to understand what wheat is. 75% of wheat in the chemical properties of wheat is amylopectin, and the other 25% is amylose. Amylose can be found in tons and tons and tons of different things. Amylose in beans, because beans have amylose. That is called amylose C, and amylose C is very, very hard for your body to digest. That's why when you eat too many beans, they take a while to digest and they kind of ferment a little and then you get some gas. The kind of amylose that is in wheat is amylose A. And amylose A is very, very, very easy for your body to digest. It's because of the fact that, again, now the husk and the bran of it is very soluble to our bodies, so it immediately can go into our system. But the amylopectin is what you have to kind of worry about. And the amylopectin that is in wheat is called amylopectin A. Amylopectin A is basically the sugar that can come out. It's the part of gluten, because gluten is the sugar. It's the part of the gluten sugar that affects our body the most. And with amylopectin A, the second you start eating it, it starts having an effect on your body. The enzymes within it start affecting your brain function. That is why when it comes to children that have ADD and ADHD, they are affected most by this amylopectin. And without getting too scientific and losing everybody, including myself in this room, amylopectin is housed within something called gluconeogenic protein A. So when you have the gluconeogenic protein A, that's the big house of it, and the amylopectin makes up, there are tons of little amylopectins that are in that big thing. When you start digesting it, those amylopectins go out into your brain as sugars, but they're a different kind of sugar than like a table sugar or a fructose or a glucose. They are highly charged sugars. So when they go into your bloodstream, and especially for children, when they get up into your brain, they stop blocking the chemical receptors and the neurological receptors in your brain. So for kids that have ADD and ADHD, it means that they're very sensitive to amylopectin A, and it makes it so that the neurons that are trying to fire and connect with each other, they're getting blocked by this amylopectin. Why that becomes important in the grand scheme of things is that neurological process, you don't have to have ADD and ADHD for it to end up affecting you. The other thing that it does is it confuses your brain to think that what you're eating isn't enough for you. So when you eat wheat, one of the first things that happens is you want more. And it's this vicious cycle that you eat it, and this goes to your brain, and then within minutes, you want it. And when you have somebody that is kind of wheat addicted, if you are to tell them, look, we're going to take you off wheat, and I mean, I have 200 plus patients that, of them, at least half of them, I tried to take off of wheat, and the reaction I get to people when they finally realize I'm talking about bread, it's this panic, because you've lived your whole entire life. I mean, when you grew up and, you know, mom and dad would make you a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and you're just used to it. Bread is such a part of the American lifestyle that it's hard to imagine life without bread. And it's funny to kind of digress and talk about stuff. When you look at the healthiest countries in the world, they're all countries that don't have wheat. In fact, it's funny, not funny, but interesting would be a better note. Japan, prior to 1940, was considered one of the healthiest places in the whole entire world. The people had the lowest amount of obesity, the lowest amount of heart disease. They had the longest lifespan. They had the lowest rate of cancer. And then we had a little war. And in that war, we destroyed most of the country. And with all wars, once you destroy a country, then you go to that country and you say, we're going to help you build up. And one of the things that we did that prior to the 1940s didn't exist in Japan is we had all of these people that were like, we got to give them food because we knocked out all of their food supply. And one of the things we brought over there was wheat. They got all this bread. And in 1946, the incidence of flu-like symptoms, and basically what it was kind of like E. coli. There was basically a plague that happened in Japan with all of these Japanese people that had diarrhea that just wouldn't go away. And they couldn't figure out why it was happening. And then they traced it back to the fact that their bodies had never, ever, ever had to try to digest wheat. And wheat, as it is, we're not even supposed to have. Our bodies shouldn't be able to digest wheat. I've said it before, if you go out into a field of wheat and you grab a handful of it and you chew it, it's going to come out of you the same way it went in. Well, you give this to these people who have never had it before, and they started having digestive problems, terrible digestive issues. And it wasn't until they discovered why that they were able to fix it, and it was the wheat. Since World War II, Japan has slowly but surely become Americanized. There have been more and more American foods brought there, and Japan went from being the healthiest country in the world to now it's like middle of the road. And we did it. It's our fault. When you look at the other countries that are incredibly, incredibly healthy, one of the places is South Africa. Not all of South Africa, but the southwest part of South Africa, where it originally was the Aborigines, and they ate basically whatever they could find and catch and pluck and kill and stuff like that. Then it was the late 1960s, they started taking over their land and started trying to, I won't say Americanize them, but South Africanize them and make them so they were no longer the Aboriginal tribes. They were trying to make them mainstream into society. And they started introducing things like wheat. What ended up happening to the Aboriginal tribes is that their incidence of diabetes raised by over 1,000%. They had not had wheat their whole entire life, their whole entire existence. And by introducing wheat to them, their bodies were so unprepared for it that it almost immediately caused them to have diabetic symptoms. And I'll explain why that can happen here in 1 second. When you look at what wheat does and how it does it, it shows you that wheat, in the same way as sugar is a toxin, wheat is a toxin. Because the sugars within wheat, they're actually worse for us than the sugars in, table sugar. They have to go to the liver. The liver has to figure out what to do with them, and the only way the liver can do anything with them is by sending it to the bloodstream and having the pancreas start kicking out tons of insulin. One thing that I do when I have somebody come to me who is a diabetic, whether it's type 2 or type 1, and they want to lower their blood sugars, I don't care about fruit. I don't worry about fruit. And in fact, often they kind of freak out because they're like, oh, my doctor said I can't have raisins. And I ask them why, and they say, well, it's going to make my blood sugar go too high. And I say, okay, well, what do you normally have for breakfast? Well, I have a couple slices of toast, and I have this and that, and the toast is far worse than any raisin could ever be. In fact, it's far worse than most table sugars would ever be. So yeah, I'll show you how all that works. So anyway, as your body deals with this amylopectin, then it causes fat. And the kind of fat that comes from wheat is visceral fat, and it's interstitial fat. Those are the kinds of fats that happen in your gut. Everybody has seen someone with a beer belly. Well, now there is a term that is kind of being accepted called wheat belly. And it's people that have a beer belly that don't drink beer. Because when you have the fat that comes from wheat is always carried in the front of you, and it's carried forward. It starts inside of your body, in between all of your organs, in between, surrounding your liver and things like that, and then it builds and comes out. The wheat belly is terrible because that kind of fat is what leads to the congestive heart failures It leads to coronary artery disease. It leads to all of the really bad heart things that can happen. What also happens with that kind of fat, and this is true with all fats, fats become part of your endocrine system. They create hormones. I don't know if you knew that. Fat isn't just something that is sitting there and is something you worry about trying to get rid of. It actually serves a purpose in your body, and not just as an energy source. Fat kicks out hormones. And when you have fat that comes from wheat, it kicks out a hormone that's kind of mean because it causes you to crave more of the wheat. So the people that have the wheat bellies and the belly fat, they're the people that have the hardest time to let go of wheat because of the fact their body has become used to it hormonally. So the only way you can get that kind of hormone is from the amylopectin. So your body recognizes it. It's an interesting thing. When women get pregnant, they will crave things that they can't figure out. And it's because their bodies know that they can get a certain mineral or a certain enzyme from a kind of food. There are women that crave tinfoil. They just want to chew on tinfoil, and they don't know why. And it's because their magnesium's low, and their iron is low, and their tin's low. When you have this amylopectin fat, your body knows that the only place it can get it is from wheat. And the other thing that ties in with it is wheat is a good source of iron. And when you have a good source of iron, iron's a metal. It helps your nerves work better and fire better. So when you get these hormonal urges for wheat, they feel stronger than if you had an urge for chocolate. And that's why it's so hard for people to break the cycle of being on wheat. Because of that, it becomes a vicious cycle. You eat more wheat, you get more of this kind of fat, which causes you to crave more wheat, which makes you eat more wheat, and then it's a really, really hard cycle to get away from. Another thing that's very, very important to note when it comes to wheat is where it sits on the glycemic index. And this is the one that's, I think, the most shocking for people because we've been preached to do whole wheat things because whole wheat is so much better for you than non-whole wheat or white bread or things like that. When you look at the difference between whole wheat bread and Wonder Bread, just white bread, on the glycemic index, it's almost nothing. It's 3 points. When you look at the difference between wheat bread and table sugar, which is sucrose, sucrose is better for you on the glycemic index. Your body can handle tablespoons of table sugar better than it can 2 slices of bread. Whole wheat bread. That's really, really, really important to kind of wrap your brain around, is that we're being preached. I mean, the food pyramid tells us that we're supposed to have 11 servings of grain a day. 1 piece of bread is considered 1 serving of grain a day. We're told to limit our sugars. Sugar is at the very top of the food pyramid and said, you shouldn't have that much of it. But if you have 11 servings of grain a day, and if you choose that those 11 servings are all going to be wheat, you are going to have a ton more sugar in your body. You're going to be kicking out insulin like crazy throughout the day, and you're going to be thinking that you're doing something healthy because that's what you've been preached to do. And the difference, too, if you look at the glycemic index, here's the other thing, and I included it, and I knew that I'd have to explain it, too, but look at gluten-free bread and where that is on the glycemic index. Gluten-free bread is worse than wheat bread. Am I trying to confuse you? No. But the way they make it, wheat naturally rises. Wheat is a perfect thing with all the binding agents and everything. It's the perfect thing to make bread out of. Because when you cook it, it just rises and it becomes nice and fluffy and everybody wants to eat it. When you try to use something else that isn't wheat, it doesn't do all the nice things that wheat does. So you've got to use other things to make the bread stick together and to make it so it's not grainy and nasty and fall apart. And so they have to add sugar. And they have to add all sorts of different binding agents that are sticky. So you're looking at the honeys and the juices and all of the things to make it so this gluten-free bread won't taste god-awful. There are gluten-free breads out there that are very low on the glycemic index. And you can use them when you're packing and moving because they taste the same as packing peanuts and they're awful. My wife wanted to try gluten-free, and I went to Family Fare and found, oh gosh, I forget what kind it was, but it was a little teeny loaf about this big, and it was $8. I thought, man, she better like this. And she put some peanut butter on it, and she started eating it, and she got this panic look on her face because she said, the more I chew, the more of it there is. It's like growing in there. And that's the whole thing. Gluten-free bread really sucks unless you add stuff to it to make it so it doesn't suck. So I guess the point of it is not whether it's wheat or gluten-free, it's the choice of what you're eating. I've said this before, and I will say it until the day I die. The only reason why we have bread is so our fingers don't get sticky from the good stuff we're trying to put in our mouth. It's an edible spoon. Bread, grains as it is, the reason why grains are number one on the bottom of the food pyramid, and they say that's what we should have the most of, it is believed that grains are what help lower your cholesterol. They're supposed to lower your risk of heart disease. They're supposed to lower your risk of getting things like cancers and colon cancers and things like that. Basically because of the fact that grains are supposed to help you go to the bathroom. And the more of them you have, the more you're going to go to the bathroom, the healthier you're going to be, and that's just what we figured out. What they mean to say is fiber. You should have 11 servings of fiber a day, which I don't even know what that would be, to tell you the truth. I don't even know what they consider servings, because it changes depending on the food that you're having. But fiber is important. You know, fiber is kind of the lifeblood of everything that we do, because without fiber, you're not able to digest things properly. Without fiber, you're not able to synthesize foods the right way. You know, people that go on the Atkins diet, they have, yes, it's a low carbohydrate diet, but it's a very, very low fiber diet. And that's why you have a lot of people on Atkins that the second that they get off Atkins, they're like, hallelujah. They're able to go finally, which is amazing that they can lose weight with how much they store. But it's changing your ideas of what you need to eat and what you should eat. Because we don't need bread. Bread is a comfort food. Everybody likes bread. Most everybody likes bread. Everybody likes the ability. I have people have 2 fried eggs and 2 pieces of bacon. That's one of my key go-to breakfasts every morning. And people go, well, what do I do with the yolk? I got to dip something in it. I say, take the bacon dip. No, but the bacon isn't. You got to have bread because it soaks it up, and it is. It's something that we've been taught. I mean, I swear, 200 years ago, even longer than that, when cavemen first figured out how to fry an egg, they weren't sitting there going, this would be perfect if I just had something bready. You eat. It's good. It's just learning how to change your mindset and your lifestyle, because our country is a bread country. If you watch how many things are breaded in our country, things that don't even make sense to be breaded are breaded. Pickles, deep frying pickles. Put bread on a pickle. And beer and all that other. Actually, deep fried pickles are kind of good. That wasn't bad. Anyway, We do. We try to bread everything. And a lot of times it's for ease of use. It's for the fact that we want to be able to travel while we eat. And if you put bread on the outside, your hands aren't going to get messy. But, convenience, does convenience outweigh health? And that's what you kind of got to think of. And it is. It's tough to get rid of wheat. I will admit, I will sit here and I'll be preaching against wheat, and every now and then, when my kids have their spaghetti and garlic bread, and I have to look at it the whole time while I'm cooking it, I'll have a piece. And I've tried gluten-free bread with them. God, I wish I would have recorded that because it was hilarious. I didn't warn them ahead of time. And my 3-year-old looked at me and said, "Daddy, you're wrong." It's like, okay, I'm sorry. The only thing you can do to make wheat worse, because wheat as it is, really bad. The only thing you can do to make wheat worse is to add sugar to it. And that's what makes us America, because what do we preach in the morning? Every morning. In fact, we live in Battle Creek. Cereal. Not only cereal, but waffles. And when you have a waffle, what do you have to add to a waffle? Yes. So you're going to have all of your wheat, and it's not going to be good enough because your blood sugar is going to go through the freaking roof. Let's add syrup to it just to make sure. Did I lose me? Oh, I felt something move. Wow, sorry about that. Move that over. When you have sugar on top of wheat, not only are you making your pancreas kick out more insulin than it should in a week, you're causing your brain to get sugar, which stops it from producing leptin. And again, leptin, for those of you who haven't heard me speak before, leptin is the chemical that goes to your brain that says, "Hey, I'm full." Leptin goes to your brain before you get the physical response from your stomach saying, "Hey, I can't stretch anymore. We're done eating, it hurts." And you have to undo the button and do the Al Bundy and all that. So you got sugar that's stopping your brain from receiving leptin, and then you've got all of this amylopectin that's happening from the wheat that is causing you to even crave more. So that's why breakfast in this country, that's why Denny's, they have their all-you-can-eat breakfast buffet things, and you'll see people sit there for 3 hours until they literally feel like they're going to explode. And it's really not, well, it is their fault for going to Denny's. It was their own choice. But it's not, from a scientific and from a chemical standpoint, you're fighting an uphill battle because your body, doesn't matter how much willpower you have, your body has these natural receptors in it that are going to tell you you need more. And one of the things with amylopectin that I forgot to mention before is it also is a feel-good drug. It has the same kind of chemical properties as endorphins. And endorphins are released when you get really super happy. So as you're eating your bread or your donut or your waffle, you're feeling happier about your life. One of the worst things in the world, God, I'm sorry for all the people that work or have people that work at Kellogg's. One of the worst things in the world you can have is a Pop-Tart. And one of the worst Pop-Tarts you can have are the brown sugar cinnamon. It is the perfect concoction of crap to make your body so it constantly craves it. And here's another thing. I hate preaching against Kellogg's, but it happens every single time. When you get Pop-Tarts, look at the serving size. It's 1, and they package 2 together. You want to know why? Because they know you're not going to waste that other one. No one's going to just roll it up and tape it so it doesn't go bad. You're going to eat that other one. And they know if you eat 2, you'll probably eat 4. And they only put 6. Do they put 6 or 8 in a box? I want to see who answers that really quickly. Oh, there's 8. Not that I would know, but there's. Yeah. It's a situation where we have been preached to things that, I mean, even on the box of Pop-Tarts, it tells you that they're whole grain. Whole grain goodness. It's not. And that is why we're facing the things that we're facing now. Now let's talk about going gluten-free, because is it worth it? Yes. Gluten-free bread? No. There's really no point to gluten-free bread. If you're going to go gluten-free, the things that you can go gluten-free and actually be doing a good thing for yourself are things like gluten-free pastas. Excuse me. Because when it comes to gluten-free pastas, especially if you pick the right ones, they're very low on the glycemic index. It's a kind of carbohydrate that is both short-term and long-term carbohydrate, which means it's a medium chain and a long chain kind of carbohydrate. So you'll get an immediate kind of energy boost from it, and you can get a prolonged energy boost from it. Things like quinoa pasta. Quinoa is a superfood. It has protein in it, it has carbohydrates in it, it has fiber in it, it has everything that you could possibly need. And when you have quinoa pasta, then you're dealing with, a carbohydrate, plus you're getting proteins from it, plus whatever you're throwing on top of it should and could be really good for you. And quinoa helps you so you stay fuller longer. It doesn't kick in the whole amylopectin thing, so your body knows when it's full. And that's one of the key things. Whenever you have any kind of carbohydrate, when you add a fiber to it, you're helping your body to know when you're full. For most people, when they have fruit, I encourage them to have nuts, because the fiber in the nuts will help your body to deal with the sugar in the fruit, and it won't cause the whole leptin response. So you'll know when you're full. Going gluten-free. Pastas are good. The whole gluten-free veggie chips and things like that, they're awful for you. They're awful. They couldn't make something worse for you. You should never, ever, ever eat any kind of chip. There was a study from University of Stanford where they actually watched and they did the healthy chips and they did the unhealthy chips. And because of how they are processed in the oils that they have to use to make them as crispy and crunchy and wonderful, 98% of all the calories that are in a chip are stored as fat. They can't go anywhere else. Your body doesn't know what to do with them other than store them as fat. So, chips are terrible for you. So if you get a gluten-free chip, you got something that's gluten-free and terrible for you. Yippee. It is important to look at things like gluten-free broths. One of my friends has a cousin starting up a cupcake shop, and she wants help on finding some really good gluten-free cupcakes. That's like trying to find smoke-free crack. I mean, yeah, it's something that for people that have celiac disease and Crohn's disease, having something gluten-free, that makes it so that they can enjoy the tasty goodness of sugar and high fructose corn syrup without feeling ill like they're going to explode. But from a long-term health standpoint, there's no way you're going to find a healthy cupcake. I'm sorry. But trust me, I'm really sorry, because I used to love Little Debbie a lot. I still miss her. I write her now and then. If you want to go gluten-free, which really is important, because once you take it out of your system, and this is really important, gluten sticks around your body for 8 days. If you have gluten, it will stick around your small intestine and your intercellular tissues for about 8 days. Because if you look at gluten through a very, very high-powered microscope, it has these little teeny tiny hairs that they stick to things. And that's how it is able to transport so easily, and that's why it causes so much insulin to be kicked out, because insulin can attach all over. And because of that, it sticks around. So if you have gluten, it's going to stick around for 8 days and you're going to feel the effects for 8 days. So if you go gluten-free, you need to make sure you're truly going gluten-free. If you do it kind of halfway, it really doesn't, you don't get the benefit from it. And people that have celiac disease who, they feel like it's this terrible, terrible affliction, which it is. But people with celiac disease are some of the most healthy people in the world because they're forced to be. They can't have the wheat. They can't have the kind of sugars that everybody else can survive. And they have a longer life because of it, and a healthier life because of it. So, anybody have any questions? Yes.
You mentioned the gluten-free pastas, and you talked about that some of those pastas have a different glycemic index.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any way that we can see that on the packaging?
Mm-hmm. Well, you can go, in fact, I'll find the website for you. There is a website that is all about glycemic indexes, and it's fairly accurate. But, if you get rice pasta from one company and have rice pasta from another company, because of how they make it and the ingredients that they use, the glycemic indexes on the two might be a little bit different. For the most part, when you average out like what a rice pasta is, the glycemic index for a rice pasta is about a 71. So it's pretty high. The glycemic index for a quinoa pasta is about a 54. And that's much, much, much lower. Yes?
I work for a daycare. I cook. Some suggestions on what could be served, like they have to have grain every day for their lunch.
Mm-hmm.
So when you make pasta, would I use regular egg noodles or some suggested the whole wheat?
That is something that I literally, if you wanted to come into my office free of charge, and I would love to be able to talk with you about like your budget, because a lot of it has to do with your budgetary constraints. Because when you deal with like gluten-free things and stuff like that, it's for no apparent reason it costs more money.
You got to find something 100 kids are going to eat
Yeah.
without throwing garbage.
Yeah. There are things that are gluten-free that would help tremendously. And when it comes to the snacky kinds of things, those are often the biggest culprits. Because kids want crackers, kids want, Cheez-Its and things like that. It is something that, because of your budget, you'd need to find ways do you do it here?
Yeah, the daycare.
Okay. It's something that I would like to talk to you, and then together we could talk to Brian at Something Better Natural Foods. And there might be a way for him to kind of sponsor it, maybe do some kind of thing where he could advertise here and everything. By the way, if any of you aren't familiar with Something Better Natural Foods, it is Mecca. I mean, it's this wonderful, wonderful, big old pole barn of a building. People there are wonderful. The food they have there is wonderful. They cater to gluten-free. They cater to specialty needs. And it's just an amazing, amazing place. And if we can contact them and kind of get them on board to help, I think they'll be kind of open to it, because I know I send them hundreds of people every week. And, to have the federal center kind of attached to what they do too, it'd be a really good business for them. So maybe we can talk to them about doing some kind of a sponsorship deal, that maybe they could even help you with giving you a little discount on the snacky kinds of things that will help them be gluten-free. Because again, especially with kids, and I won't go off on lactose right now, that's a whole other thing that we could do. But if you can remove milk and wheat from a child's diet, the kid's going to learn easier, going to be more calm, and just going to be a happier kid. And that would be something that, again, love to sit down and talk to you about it, because I think it would help a lot. Yeah?
The state requires that the childhood center serve certain foods. How does your program meet with those guidelines for children?
I can make it so it meets those guidelines.
So can you make an appointment with us at the daycare center?
Sure, I would love to. I work with Star Commonwealth to, in fact, to put together their whole nutritional packet when it comes to the families and everything with their outreach system. So I'm really familiar with it, and you know, there's ways to finagle around some of the things that they're requiring that aren't necessarily the healthiest things.
Milk is a requirement.
Yeah, and we can talk about that because there are lots of different kinds of ways to do milk that are better for kids. Any other questions? Wonderful. Thank you for allowing me to come out here and talk about wheat and wherever else my brain went. Sorry if you have somebody that works at Kellogg's, and I don't mean to diss Kellogg's every time I talk, but it just kind of happens on accident. So, yeah, and thank you for having me out here. Appreciate it.